In this video we're going to model a Tealight stand using SketchUp for schools. The Tealight stand we're going to model is this one, which as you can see has 7 different individual parts, but there are only 3 types of parts. The 3 candle blocks are all identical, as are the 3 ribs. The spine is unique. The dimensions we're using are these, and I do need to acknowledge that the design is taken from one created by Steve Ramsey from Woodwork for Mere Mortals, but the dimensions are as we have worked out or have worked out for our own purposes. If you want to use this and draw this, perhaps you want to take a screenshot of this or just pause the video and come back to it and draw from here. When I switch to SketchUp for Schools, you'll notice that the first thing I have opened up a blank file and saved it with a new name, and that means that I have my setup as I wish to have it, but I'm not going to overwrite my blank file as I work. It's a good idea to always do this first. My workflow for drawing is going to be similar for all of the parts. I'm going to start by drawing my base, which in this case is going to be a rectangle. I select from my tools menu, or otherwise I can use the letter R. I start on the origin, I drag out, I can click if I want to, I don't need to. 300, 12, those are the dimensions I want. I'm then going to push pull into a 3-dimensional shape, and I'm going to type 42 as the height that I want. I'm going to use the select tool. I could hit the space bar. I'm going to triple click, and then what I'm going to do is right click and make component. I could press the letter G to do this, and this is called the spine. Then I'm going to come to the tags panel, and I'm going to add a tag called spine. And I'm going to come to the entity information panel, and I'm going to tag that object that I've just created, the entity, as spine. That means I can now move on to my next part, and if I wish I could hide this by switching off the visibility in the tags panel. I'm actually going to keep it here because I'm going to use it as for inferencing in a minute. The next part I'm going to create is my rib. I'm going to do a rectangle, again letter R. My dimensions are 120, 12. I'm going to use push pull, and I'm going to pull up and inference to the top there so that they are the same height. It means I do not need to type the dimension in this case. I'm going to triple click, right click, hit group. I could hit G. Not group, sorry. That should just be should have hit make component, so that's going to make component there, and that is going to be rib. Then I'm going to add a tag called rib, and I'm going to tag that component with that tag. I do have another part to create. This time these are going to be in the way, so I'm going to use my visibility to switch those off. I'm going to use rectangle tool, create another rectangle. That's going to be 60, 60, push pull, that's 19 millimeters, space, triple click G, and that's going to be candle block. As before, I'm going to add a tag which is going to be called candle block, and I'm going to actually allocate that tag to that instance or entity that I've just created. Now this is going to be a little bit in the way, so I am going to make that not visible, and I am instead going to switch on the spine and the rib. First thing I'm going to do now is edit some of these. I could move these into position and I could duplicate it, but it will help me to actually edit this first because I will then be able to move and snap to positions. Sometimes it's easier to, especially with a box, to move these around and create the duplicates before you go and edit. And this time the workflow that's going to work is to edit the entities first. So I'm going to use my guidelines tool here, my tape measure tool, which would be the shortcut T, and I'm going to create a guideline down here 12 millimeters, and I'm going to create a guideline here that's 15 millimeters. I'm going to create a guideline from the side here which is 30. I'm going to create another one which is, whoops, and this is, you can see it hasn't pulled a line, so let's pull that there. I'm going to do that up here, and you can see it's pulling a parallel guideline, and that is 60. I also need a line from here, and you'll notice again that green arrow, that means I'm pulling it along parallel to the green axis. I don't want it along the red, I want it along the green, and I'm going to pull that 24, and I'm going to do that again, and I'm going to come across 12. Now I can then cut out the pieces that I need to cut out from this shape, but I need to edit the actual component itself. So if I simply draw on top of it, I'm drawing new lines. I need to double click. That allows me to edit this. Now you can see the guidelines have become a bit more faint. You can draw the guidelines after you hit the double click, but it's a lot harder to erase them afterwards. So I'm going to use the pencil tool. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap to that intersection where I've created the grid lines, snap to my intersection. I'm going to snap to the intersection, snap to the intersection. I can use a pencil tool, or I can use a rectangle tool. In this case, I'm going to snap to the intersection and snap to that intersection. These pieces need to be cut away, so I'm going to use the push-pull tool, and I'm going to take those away like that, and that is my rib edited. Now I don't need these guidelines, so I can delete those. These ones here I'm still going to use because I'm going to I'm going to transfer them round, and I'm going to use the intersection rather than have to type the dimensions again. Makes life a lot easier, and at that point I can erase those guidelines, and also at this point the rib being visible does not help me. So I'm going to use guidelines again, and I'm going to start off with a guideline that is 30 and another one that is 60. I have a guideline inside here that is 24 and another one that is 12. And I do have other guidelines that I need to move down here, but I'm going to show you a neat little trick in a minute. This one, maybe what I'll do is I'll take this guideline here, which is 30, because I'm going to use that one. So here what I'm going to do is use the pencil tool, but I need to be editing the component. I'm going to zoom in a bit so that I can see my guidelines a little bit better. I'm not sure if it'll show up in the video, but I have an intersection there, an intersection here, I have an intersection there, an intersection there. So I've used the guidelines to create a grid, and it allows me to snap to grid. This piece needs to be cut out. However, before I do that, I'm actually going to come here and I'm going to double click that, and what you can see is it's highlighted that surface and that the lines around the perimeter. And I'm going to use my move tool here, so this one here, or use the letter M. I'm going to snap onto here, and when I drag it's going to do a few things, but I'm going to hit the Control or Command key for a Mac, and you see it duplicates, and I'm going to slide it across. And remember, I put that other guideline 30 millimeters away from the end there, so I'm going to snap to the intersection. I have another one, but I want 3 along there. So what I'm going to do is in this little measurements box here, I'm going to type ×2 and hit enter, and I get a duplicate copy again. So I don't need to draw every one of them. I can duplicate off using the move tool, or sometimes you can use copy and paste. So now I go to my push pull, I take that area and I push it through. I want to do the same again. A quick shortcut: if I double click, it will repeat the distance that is there, and in so doing my spine is created and I no longer need these guidelines. So I'm going to do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back the rib, and what I need to do now is get these into position relative to each other. Now there are a couple of ways of doing this. The easiest way perhaps is to move the spine first, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the move. I'm going to snap onto this corner here, and that's going to need to be aligned with that little corner down there, and it's got an end point in the rib. So at least now I've got the spine in the correct position. Now I need to move this along to here, and you'll notice there's a point there which will actually match up. So let me select my rib first. I'm going to move and I'm going to snap using this little point here, and I'm going to drag that along onto there. Now I could do ×2, but it actually wouldn't, or ×3, it wouldn't actually get it into the right place. So I'm going to do this again. I'm going to snap, I'm going to hit my Control or Command key, and I'm going to snap onto that end point into position, and now is a good time to say ×2, and I have all of my ribs in place. So now what I need to do is I need to get my candle block into position, so I'm going to make it visible first. I'm going to select it, I'm going to move it, and what I can do once again is I can move my center point here, and I can snap it onto the center of midpoint of that line there. That puts it in the correct position as far as the vertical view is, the top view is concerned, but obviously it's too high. So now I'm going to come and I'm going to snap on this end of this line and I'm going to drag it down the length of that line. That candle block is in place, and what I can do now is I can move this, and it doesn't matter where I'm going to move it, it's the same distance. So I can select this point here, I can hit Command or Control and I can click there and I can do that, and either I can just do it again or I could hit ×2. And that's almost the Tealight stand finished. But obviously there's one feature still missing, and that's this hole in the middle. And what I'm going to show you is the key reason why we use components rather than groups. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use guidelines to create a center point in here. Then I'm going to double click to edit it. I'm going to select my circle tool, which is part of my rectangle menu, shapes menu. I can also use the letter C. I'm going to snap on the intersection of the two guidelines. I'm going to pull along there, and it is on the red axis that I'm pulling along. It doesn't matter which way we do it, but it's useful to be along an axis sometimes. And I'm going to type 19, which is the radius. It's a 38mm diameter, which is 19mm radius. And you'll see that it's drawn it on all three of these candle blocks, and that's because they're components and they're identical. If they were groups, that wouldn't be the case. I'm going to use push-pull, take that surface, push it down, type 15, and there we have the answer. Last thing I can do really here is delete the guides, and my candle block is drawn. Now, there's one other thing I'm going to show you, because there is an additional step that is useful. If I was to remove my ribs and my candle block, you can see that I can see my spine. But if I was to just show the rib, I actually show all three, and the same is true of the candle blocks. They're all three. If I'm going to do documentation, I would normally need to dimension only one of these. And so what is useful in almost every case is that whenever you're creating tags, it's always a good idea to create an additional tag, and I generally call that assembly. If you've got a more complicated item that you're modeling, you may have some sub-assemblies which may have specific names. For instance, a cabinet may have the actual cabinet case, the door and the drawer. They would be sub-assemblies, but you'd have an assembly of the entire cabinet that you want to see. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this, I'm going to select these 4 instances of, well, 2 instances of the ribs, 2 instances of the candle block. They're on the respective tags at the moment, so I'm going to tag those with assembly. And what that means is when I come here to assembly and take them away, I only have one of each. But more to the point, when I now want to see rib, I only see rib. When I want to see candle block, I only see one candle block. That's always been the case with spine, but if I want to see everything, I can make all of those tags visible and my entire object is visible. And that's the quick way of modeling a candle or Tealight stand using components, using a workflow that I've shown you, and by allocating off your different entities to a set of tags that are associated with the components. There is more to go in terms of creating scenes and doing documentation, but this is the basic requirement for every one of the models that you go from here. So I hope this is a useful video. If you want to do it yourself, watch it again, pause at the various steps, do the lock step, and you should be successful in creating a Tealight stand of your own. Good luck with it.